once everything is acquired. Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is a live interview with the former director of Jews for Judaism, Mark Powers. I'd like to welcome Mark to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Now, let me just load the page, turn the sound on so I don't have feedback in here and there that I have to deal with real quick. But I'm used to dealing with that and taking care of them, so
no problem.
I've also made two moderators that in case I don't see something that they can pretty much be on it as well.
Got it.
And it's just, all in all, it's been a while since we talked.
Yes, it has.
And I wanted to let you and everybody know the reason for that. Okay, Mickey is in here. But the reason for that was I was having issues with my mic before, that the sound quality wasn't very good, and I didn't want to I didn't like doing videos where it sounded like crap.
Got it.
And it was one I didn't want to use the term waste your time and mine, doing interviews where it was going to sound like, to use the term, dog shit.
I hear you.
So in that regard, it was one I wanted, and I did a live show with somebody with the mic that that mic and camera that my girlfriend had gotten me for Christmas, and it sounded decent. So I was like, all right, I can start doing interviews again. All right, Free Spirit is in here. That's good to hear. Nice to see you guys.
Nice to see everybody.
Yes, and, well, they're the ones that have commented right now in the window.
Okay.
Basically announcing that they're here. Because if they don't, I don't know they're watching.
Right.
But I wanted to start off with the basic question of, one of the things we hear a lot about, especially with the hurricanes and so forth, and the near asteroid that passed, is Christians talk about the end of the world type of thing. And I'm curious, from the Jewish perspective, is there an end of the world scenario in Judaism?
Yeah, well, basically, you guys are toast. And we're the only ones that are going to survive, and it's been really nice knowing you. We don't have that scenario. You know, our end of the world scenario, if you will, is that the world becomes perfected. What is the general purpose of everything that we do in the world? You know, when Jews are involved in doing what we call mitzvot. Let's see if I can come up with a translation. People generally call it good deeds, but it's not really good deeds. It's fulfilling the commandments that God gave to us. What's the whole purpose of it? What are we working for? Are we working for when we pass from this life into another life? What is the whole point of it? And the whole point of it is to make this world a better place and get it to the point of perfection that it's a world in which everybody can live at a time of peace and tranquility, a time when there are no wars, there's no conflict. It's the old lion lying down with the lamb scenario, and so forth and so on. So that essentially is our viewpoint of the end of the world. It's the end of the world as we know it, and with all that's going on in the world, I was looking at a list of places that are in conflict today, and I said, holy cow, No offense to anybody from India. Um, the world is really in a mess, and
Yeah.
and you've got the little dictator in North Korea lobbing missiles, and
Yeah.
you've got people killing people left and right. Our objective is to get to a time of peace, and that to us, when that occurs, either by something that we do or we believe that God is going to accomplish it regardless of whether we can or we cannot, and in His time, it's a world in which we'll all be able to live in harmony.
Okay. I mean, that really.
And
It
then you guys
doesn't.
are toast.
And we're toast. But it doesn't have the apocalyptic or dramatic effect that
Well,
Christianity.
there is a scenario of Gog and Magog, a kind of war to end all wars when everybody will be aligned against Israel and oh wait a minute, that's already happening in the United Nations. And there'll be this one final battle, and the people who are coming against Israel will be defeated, and then we'll segue into that perfect world. But there's no fire and brimstone. There's no roasting marshmallows. There's no
No roasting marshmallows. Well, but I like doing that.
yeah, but not when you're roasting them in your hand.
No.
So it's not that kind of scenario. We don't buy it. We don't see anything in the Jewish Bible that says anything like that.
Well, one of the things I wanted to touch on until we get some questions is, and before I do that, I'm going to shrink down the one screen so that I can have up with the Bible, because you had told me before about the commandments of Noah, that God gave commandments to Noah.
Correct.
And I wanted to touch on those and just establish what are they, that because these are the ones that apply to everybody, right?
Correct, because before there were Jews, before there were Christians, before there was anything, there was Noah and his family, and we all came from Noah. And so God gave to Noah and his family guidelines by which they should live their life, and they're universal guidelines. They apply to everybody: Jews, non-Jews, Buddhists, Hindus, atheists, anybody. And they're general guidelines on how you're to live your life. And now I've got to come up with a list of 7. One is to establish courts of law, not to tear the limb from a living animal and eat it, not to engage in illicit sexual relations, not to I just had a train of thought and my train just went off the track.
What chapter is this in Genesis?
I believe, now you're really testing me. I have to get up and have to go grab something to look at. I wasn't prepared to do that, but that's okay. Hang on here.
Because I like having the aspect that I can not only talk about something but show everybody.
Sure. And so it is in, as you said, in Genesis.
Yeah.
Let me just get it here. Okay.
There's also, because one of the things I wanted to touch on, since you have Genesis 6:3, and even I have the Jewish version up right now, where it says that the Lord said, "My spirit will not always strive with man, for that he is also flesh. Therefore his days shall be 120 years." I'm curious about the "he is also flesh." Because...
Okay. Hang in there 1 second.
Okay.
I have a real great difficulty playing Rolodex Bible. So Let's stick with one thing first, and we're looking at Genesis chapter 9, and this is when Noah leaves the ark. God tells him to be fruitful and multiply. And let's see. Okay. Okay. You shall have no graven images. There should be no murder. Trying to find the rest of it, but basically it's in chapter 9. Okay, now what was your other question? I'm sorry.
Okay, I had goofed.
I have difficulty thinking and chewing gum.
Yeah, so do I. Okay. Oy vey.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. There is the aspect of Genesis 6:2 or 6:3 where it says, "For he is also flesh."
Okay.
I'm curious what that would mean as far as from a Jewish.
Well, your problem. One of the problems you have is that your translation is incorrect.
Okay.
Okay. And so God said, "My spirit shall not contend evermore concerning man, since he is but flesh.
Okay.
His days shall be 120 years."
So that is a matter of, because I was looking at it as a what the fuck, and that's a translation issue.
Right, and essentially, it's a reference to the fact that God is now going to wait 120 years to see if mankind straightens out, and if mankind doesn't straighten out, then they're toast. Got a lot of toast this evening.
Yeah.
And of course, we know from several chapters later that we were toast.
Yeah, and I just want to.
God gave us 120 years, which we say is a full lifetime. Why do we say it's a full lifetime? Because that's the age to which Moses lived. And we say that Moses lived a full lifetime, and he was 120 years when he died.
Well,
so here again, you have God referring to 120 years, in that he's going to give mankind from this point 120 years to shape up, or he's going to ship them out.
Then, well, to follow along those lines, what about where it also says that this God, the God clearly says that, but then Noah lived to be well over 120 years, and there's characters like Methuselah that were close to 1,000.
Right, but the question is, from the point that God said that until the flood, how many years was it?
Oh, I have no idea.
Okay. So Noah, in chapter 7, it tells us that Noah was 600 years old when the flood water was upon the earth. Excuse me, but how old was Noah when he was told to build the ark, and so forth and so on? And so that's where we get the 120 years.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious because it was things that didn't make a whole lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
But now, where is it that it is written about the laws that are from Noah?
Right.
Getting back to that.
As I said, chapter 9.
Chapter 9, okay.
Yeah, chapter 9.
And that was... Is not killing in there?
I believe it is. Yeah.
Because that's one of the things I'm curious about is
Okay. Let's stop for a second here because I had something happen to me when I was giving a lecture in Leningrad in the former Soviet Union when it was still the Soviet Union. And I made a statement about, or somebody was talking about the Ten Commandments, and they said, I said something along the line of, God is a forgiving God, and so forth and so on. And the person made a comment about the Ten Commandments, and how it says, "You shall not kill," yet God kills left and right,
right,
and tells people to kill left and right. What's up with that? And I said, yeah, and again, you have to remember that my Russian is not good enough to get along real well in a lecture, so I was being translated. And I would say, but yeah, that's exactly the situation. God says that you shouldn't do this, and the guy, he's astounded. Like what are you, some kind of an idiot? You're saying the same thing I'm saying. No, I'm not saying. I'm saying until it finally dawned on me that there was a problem in the translation. And I asked him, is there a different word in Russian for kill and murder? And the answer was no, it's the same word in Russian. So while I was saying that God is saying you shall not murder, it was the same word in Russian as kill, and that's where we had a problem. And that's where we're having a problem here as well, because it's talking about murder.
well, because what I was going to get at is the aspect of with, and I know you hate Rolodex Bible, but I think it's Exodus 22 where it says, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live."
Yes, I believe you are. I'm not sure about Exodus 22, but
and that's where I have a bit of an issue with the idea of the God being opposed to killing and then turning around and saying, "Kill here."
Yeah, right. But what's the difference between kill and murder?
Well, the aspect of the not pretty much permitting someone to live, to me, that's murder. Just because they're a witch or whatnot. Yeah, it's Exodus 22:18. Thou shalt not suffer a sorceress.
I'm looking at it also. So let's go for a second and see if we can explore the concepts here.
Okay.
Okay. God clearly tells, and I think the best example I can give you is he tells King Saul to go out and kill all of the Amalekites. And Saul wages war against them and defeats them, and he was told that you shall kill them from the least to the greatest, from the youngest to the oldest, and to kill their cattle, and and essentially obliterate them from the face of the earth. Now, why would God say this when he says don't murder? Are there cases where killing is justifiable? And of course, we're now going to get into a discussion about capital punishment. Is capital punishment justifiable?
Right.
Is it?
I think in some cases, yes, because we have no other.
So you have at least some cases where killing or murdering somebody is justifiable.
Right.
So here you have a situation where God is saying that it is justifiable to kill the Amalekites because God sees things that we don't see. God knows things that we don't know. And he knows that down the road, the Amalekites are going to be the progenitors of terrible, terrible things and terrible, terrible people, and to annihilate them now will save the world a whole bunch of aggravation later down the road.
Okay.
We see later down the road, for example, in the Bible, in the book of Esther, that I don't know if you're familiar with the story, but making a long story short, Haman has a vendetta against Mordecai the Jew, and he plots not just to kill Mordecai, but to annihilate all the Jews. And, his plot is overthrown and so forth and so on. But who is this guy Haman? He's known as Haman HaAgagi, the Agagite. And who's Agag? Agag was the king of the Amalekites that Saul permitted to live for a period of time. And he was able to reproduce, and so down the road we have his descendant who created all sorts of horrendous things. And there are many people who believe that that Hitler was a descendant of the Amalekites. Whether that's true or not, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Would you permit Hitler to live?
There is a question, the aspect of, I think it's a moral quandary of if you would be able to kill Hitler before World War II, would you do it? And it's a bit of a moral quandary because prior to World War II had done what we know he did.
Right.
But
you don't have, and I don't have the insight that God has.
We don't have the crystal ball type of thing, yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm like, I plugged my crystal ball in and it wasn't working. So we don't have that type of insight yet. Apparently God does, and he said to kill these people. So it was, in the context, it was a justifiable killing.
But
as opposed to a cold-blooded murder where there's no justification for it.
What I'm curious about is this distinction made in Genesis with regard to killing?
Yes, because again, we have a distinct word for kill, a distinct word for murder, and there's a concept behind each of them. Killing is justifiable. Murder is not.
Okay. Well, Free Spirit had said all we can do is learn from Hitler, but the question, Free Spirit, was if you could kill Hitler if you could go back in time and kill Hitler in his childhood, would you do it?
Because you have, Free Spirit, you have the crystal ball today. We have 20/20 hindsight. So what I'm saying is that God already has the 20/20 hindsight, and he knew, or he knows, what exactly the situation is.
But that raises a question I have with the God. A big one.
Okay.
The God, if he has this perfect knowledge of what's going to happen, that means he knew every single woman, and he allowed every single woman to be raped, child molested, animal to be tortured, so forth, and at no point in any of it did it step in and say, I'm not going to let this happen?
And your conclusion then is God ain't great.
The Christopher Hitchens, either God isn't great or God doesn't exist.
Okay. Well, let me posit a third possibility here. When we look at the Bible and we start at Genesis, and it says that God walked with Adam, and God knew Adam, and Adam knew God, personally. They were close buds. They hung out together. As you go through the Bible, you can see that God is working in different ways. No longer does he step in and throw lightning bolts, for example, but he lets certain things happen in a natural way until we get, for example, to the book of Esther, the one that I described earlier with the Amalekites, or with Haman. What's interesting about the book of Esther is it's the only book in the Bible in which God's name is not mentioned once. Not once. And yet, we can see, you want to call it coincidence? The coincidences line up in such a way that it becomes somewhat obvious that somebody is behind the scenes pulling the strings. And so we have, as we progress through the years, because when God first presents this information to the Jewish people at Sinai, this is kind of new stuff in the world, if you will. And until the world gets used to it or has been introduced to it for a period of time, God is kind of there. He's there in the fire and the thunder on Sinai, the clouds, and so forth and so on. And he leads the people by a pillar of smoke during the day and a pillar of fire at night. And, so there's a physical presence, if you will, although that's really a lousy description because God doesn't have one, but some sort of physical indication that somebody is there. Well, as you work your way through the Bible, that kind of fades into the background until you get to the book of Esther, when God is not mentioned one time, but yet you can see there's somebody there. So if God was, as you suggest, able to, and certainly he was able to stop this and he was able to prevent that and so forth and so on, then ultimately what we would be is, let me rephrase, what we have from God now, the greatest gift that we have is free will. God set guidelines and he said, do this, don't do that, watch it if you do that, you're in trouble if you do that, but you can do that, and so forth and so on. If every time we made a move and God stepped in and put his hand up and said, nope, or if he threw a lightning bolt at Hitler or one of the leaders of ISIS and so forth and so on, then we become nothing more than puppets. And the gift that he gave us of free will, the ability to sit and reason and think and come up to conclusions and to weigh, should we do this? Should we not do this? What are my consequences? Do I want to deal with the consequences now, or do I want to deal with the consequences of what I do later on in my life or in another world? We would become puppets, and therefore nothing at all. So we see that God has, if you will, stepped back, and he continues to step back through all the pages of the Bible, starting at the beginning when he's there very, very clearly until he's not there. But he's there, but he's not there. I submit to you that God was there. Let's take the situation of World War II. God was there, and God, he didn't put up his hand and stop this, and he didn't take out Hitler and so forth and so on. But please explain to me why Hitler opened up the Eastern Front when it was contrary to the advice of every general that he had. And why did he open it up when it was heading into winter? I mean, here's a guy who tactically took Germany from nothing to the greatest power in the world. He was minutes away, if you will, from defeating Great Britain, and who knows where else. The United States, the Johnny-come-lately to World War II, was totally unprepared for it. We didn't have the munitions, we didn't have the ships, we didn't have the planes, we didn't have anything. Hitler had it all. He was working on the V2 rocket. He was working on the atomic bomb. And yet, look at what Hitler did.
Well,
look at how he messed up. Is it possible? Is it conceivable that maybe God's hand was at work there?
I think it's a stretch to try and say that God's hand was at work, because one of the things I've looked at with regards to Hitler was there is speculation that the one doctor that he had was giving him all kinds of screwed up drugs. That could have impaired his judgment to some degree.
So that's fine. I don't know.
But it wasn't just Hitler. Worked. There was Stalin. There were, I think, Mussolini was around that time.
Yeah, but Hitler was the one that was in control. Look what he did with Mussolini. He essentially gave him a tricycle and said, "Go play with yourself." Hitler was the one that was in control. He took over Italy as well, and yet the logical things that he should have done, he didn't do, and the things that he clearly shouldn't have done, and against the advice of everybody in his staff, was what he did.
Right. Now, there's...
Can you explain it? Wait, can you explain it?
As far as why he did the things he did, no.
Okay.
But...
So if we take your scenario of this doctor who's giving them all these drugs and so forth and so on, who knows how God works?
Well, that is, to use the term, a very lazy way for a God to go about things.
No, it's not a lazy way. It's a way in which God says, I have given mankind directive. I have said, this is what you should do. This is how you should act with each other. This is how you should play nicely with each other. And, okay, guys, now it's up to you. And if you don't play nicely with each other, who knows what's going to happen?
Well,
but in a lot of cases,
in the aspect of
cases, man has gone overboard. Hitler could have conquered the world, and he could have been a benevolent dictator and so forth and so on. But he wasn't. He was I don't know what word to use to describe it, but he went over and above.
Well, yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
And as such, rather than fire and smoke and lightning bolts and so forth, which God don't do no more, which is what I'm saying is that, God went behind the curtain, if you will. But that doesn't mean he wasn't there, and it doesn't mean that he didn't care, and that in whatever way he could, without, short of stepping out and saying, hey, don't do that, or I'm going to trash you right now, he did what he did.
Well, in some ways, I look at it, and parent-wise, I don't agree with spanking a child. But,
okay.
And my girlfriend is different from me in that regard. She feels that there are times, basically a swat on the butt isn't a bad thing. Mm-hmm. But in cases like what I'm going to mention, you mentioned about the aspect of playing nice with each other. And yes. That raised a thought in my mind. If you have two children and you're the parent and you're sitting back, you don't necessarily get involved when they're playing, even if they're roughhousing a little bit.
Right.
You don't necessarily get involved right away, but if the one starts to do something where they could be harming the other,
right.
I think as a good parent, you have to step in and say, okay, that's it.
Good. And I agree with you wholeheartedly, but let me ask you this question.
Mm-hmm.
What if the child is 45 years old?
I would say it doesn't matter. Age is just a number. If they're not...
But, you can step in with a 6-year-old and pick them up by the back of the pants and drag them off.
Why couldn't a God pick some...
When the child is 45 years old, you can't do that, and hopefully between 6 and 45, the child has learned something, that you have given them sufficient guidelines that they're not going to do that.
Well,
And that's
there's
the whole point. And that's the whole point, because God has given us guidelines, and He has given us choices.
what about people
And we
that are
make the
born
choices.
sociopaths? People that are
What
born
about?
with either a chemical imbalance or
Yes,
a brain defect where they are a sociopath or psychopath,
right.
and they have an
And
inability to
does
empathize.
society deal with them?
The only thing we can do is either put them in prison after they've hurt
Yep.
somebody or kill them.
Right,
We have no way of treating this.
right. We have no way of treating it, and in many instances, we have no way of knowing it
Right,
until it manifests itself. Right.
right. There are cases, like my girlfriend mentioned to me just today, of the area that I live, and you're actually in relatively the same vicinity, but there have been
Mhm.
cats that have been found hanged. And it is something that I had said, so we have a serial killer in this area,
Right.
or a
Because
potential.
That's right. Because
Yes.
that's something that is an indication of something to come.
Right.
Okay?
And
So if you as a society see something like that, do you say something? Do you do something?
I think somebody like a person that is doing something like that, well, it is, she did mention to me that animal cruelty is now a federal crime.
Correct. But
And that, I think, is a good
so
thing.
Society, good. So society is doing something about it, right?
Yes.
Okay. So
But I don't think that absolves a
let's
God
take it- wait a
from.
minute. Hang on. Let's take it back now to 1936,
Mm-hmm.
and it's now not a crime to kill Jews.
Right, just like it wasn't a crime to kill Native Americans.
Right.
Because I had heard some speculation that where Hitler got his ideas for how to treat the Jews was how the Americans treated the indigenous people.
I'd like to see that because
It's
I
called
believe
the
there are other
American
sources.
Holocaust.
Okay.
Nearly all
I haven't read it. I've heard of it.
nearly all Native Americans
But
were
I think-
genocided.
Sure. I know, but I think that Hitler had other sources for what he did. Is
Oh, it might not have been his
at
only.
the risk of offending people.
Mhm.
A lot of his sources was the church,
Right. Because
and
a disturbing thing for me is after his defeat, the ones that helped his soldiers and Nazi scientists escape Germany was the Catholic Church.
Yep.
Through what is called the Rat Line.
right. But that's why I say I think there were other sources that Hitler had that are more provable than what the United States did to Native Americans.
But one of the people in the chat section had said, and I do want to mention this to you, is they had said God allowed the slaughter because he didn't want their descendants to. He didn't want their descendants to afflict the world with in the future is laughably absurd. I think it's
Okay.
the aspect of like the Amalekites that the God said about committing genocide so that the descendants of them wouldn't do something in the future is laughably absurd. And
Okay.
I would add viciously cruel. Because even if you have Hitler that was a descendant of that line, which hasn't been established, but let's say he was, just because there's one person in a bloodline that's going to go off the rails, does that justify killing the entire bloodline thousands of years before that?
Okay. Well, the answer to that is basically this: that again, your crystal ball and my crystal ball are not working, but apparently God's crystal ball was, and he saw within the Amalekites some defect, if you will, that affected all of them. And that he knew that unless they were all eradicated, that it presented a potential future problem.
The
Again,
thing is,
I don't have that crystal ball. All I can tell you is that is the explanation for the annihilation, or if you will, the genocide of that particular group. Is it possible that if you raise a family in a particular way, let me go back. If you raise children to hate people who are pink or green, and all your children hate people who are pink and green, and they teach their children to hate people who are pink and green, and to kill people who are pink and green, and so forth and so on, and that permeates through, what then do we have?
well, I don't think you have the conclusion that you're trying to go to.
Okay.
And I have a prime example of that.
Okay.
The Phelps family. Are you familiar with the Phelpses?
I am, but again,
They're
what you're doing is you're taking a concrete example.
Yes, and the thing is, wait a
minute, against the example that I'm saying, where we don't have the insight into the entire spectrum, and that apparently God's decision, God's information, God's crystal ball said that this affected the entire group of people. That there wasn't, we go back, we talked about Noah earlier, right? Out of all the people in the world, he saved Noah and his family. Why? Why just Noah? You mean he was the only one worth saving? And the answer is, yeah, he was the only one worth saving. So here you have a group of people that God determines that down the road a piece, there's going to be significant problems with these people, that it's going to have an impact upon the world. And while you may have a Phelps family, this group of people does not have within it anybody redeemable.
The problem is, like the aspect with the Phelps family, the reason I mentioned them is they taught their kids from the minute those kids were born.
Yes.
This hate and viciousness and cruelty. And they used God as a justification. That did not stop at least one of them from becoming an atheist.
Correct.
And speaking against that family.
Again, what I'm saying is, you're looking with 20/20 hindsight at a particular individual within a group. And I'm saying we don't have the foresight that apparently God had, who determined that this entire body of people, that there was not one person down the road who was going to be worth saving.
As one of the people commented in the comment section, is why would a father play games like this? It seems breathtakingly cruel, in my opinion. Okay. It seems that this God is showing that it is incapable of basic human empathy and basic human control.
Well, wait a minute. Where's the empathy for the rest of mankind? Let's say that these people had been unleashed en masse against all of mankind. Where then is the empathy about the rest of mankind? Is there no empathy? Is there no empathy there?
The thing is, you don't have an entire group, an entire culture that is all bad. We had this stereotype back with All in the Family of the idea that all black people are bad because they're black.
Mm-hmm.
And that type of generalization, we still have it today with a lot of Christians, that they want to act like all atheists are bad because they're atheists. Or,
you mean it's not true?
No, it's not. Believe it or not. And the aspect of, because I've seen a meme of, because I've heard some Christians say this to atheists: why do you eat babies? Mm-hmm. And the response, the snarky, why do you eat babies? And the snarky response is, because they're tasty. It just, and that was what was said about like Christians or Jews by the Christians back during, and because like Lewis Black had addressed part of that in a comedy bit he did, where he said about, they would say about Jews would like kill Christian church. He's like, that's not true. He's like, we basically put them to work.
Yep.
The aspect of, and because it's one you can't say, it's a, I know it's a logical fallacy of some sort to try and characterize an entire group as being a certain way just because of the actions of a few.
But what if it's the entire group? And not just the actions of a few?
I've never seen that. Honestly.
I understand that. Wait a minute. I fully understand that, and I fully understand how difficult it is to conceive of it. However, apparently, that's what God saw. And
I think that God was wrong.
Okay.
I mean, point blank. Because if that would be the case, there would be some evidence from at least one other culture that that is the case. And of like over in the Americas, the Native Americans could make a very strong case that white man has been a source of extreme destruction and suffering.
Sure.
And
what if I can give you that case?
And the thing is,
wait a minute, what if I can give you that case?
That's fine. It doesn't mean I am.
No, I don't mean to say you. What I'm saying is, you said that you can't give me a case of any group of people who are like that.
Any entire group? I don't.
Yeah. Okay. But I'm going to give you that case.
Okay.
Or at least I'm going to attempt to. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
Because down the road a piece, the descendant of this King Agag tried to destroy all the Jews. So here is somebody who did not grow up under the influence of his father, because Agag was killed, and he was supposedly the last survivor, although there was a kid after him, and didn't grow up under his terrible influence and so forth and so on. And yet, down the road, when he came of age, what did he try to do?
Basically, that's showing that person. That's not showing the entire culture.
Okay, that's fine. But what I'm saying is that, again, the reason that God said to wipe them out was because he apparently saw that there was nothing redeemable within this group of people, within this culture, within this nation, whatever you want to call it. We can sit and argue it. We're not going to go anywhere because I don't, and you don't have God's insight or his crystal ball, and mine isn't working.
Well, there's also, in a sense, issues. I can extend this with like the flood story. The God was pissed off at people. Okay, fine. Why take out the animals? Why not just send a disease that? Because this God had showed that, to use the aspect of a disease being able to be sent, there is a case, and it's a matter of, there's also a question of why didn't God clean up his worms? It's called the guinea worm. That it is speculated that this could have been the God's fiery serpents because of their life cycle is pretty much only fulfilled by infecting a human host and having these painful worms coming out the feet, and the only way that people can get relief is to put their feet in water, which then finishes their life cycle, because then they're back in the water, the infected water that the people drank in order to get infected. If God,
well, I'll give you the definitive answer to that, which will absolutely positively end the discussion.
Okay.
And the answer is I don't know.
Because things like that, if the God is pissed off at people.
Yeah. No, I think it's a great question. I don't know the answer to it.
And these are things.
I'll see if I can. Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. But I really don't know how to respond to it because I don't know the answer to it. What I can do is do some research on it.
Okay.
But, again, I think it's a great question. I really do. And one which I don't have an answer to.
Because my thought is, like, you've probably seen Star Trek with Q.
Yes, of course.
And basically, I equate, if a God would exist, it's Q.
Okay.
And
Q pops up every now and then. And it's not like Q was there at the beginning and then kind of faded into the background. So it's different.
Well, he was kind of there at the beginning in the first original Star Trek with Trelane.
No, I know he was. I'm just saying with Q, he pops up at any point in time. It doesn't matter. It's not like a timeline where he was there at the beginning and then he slowly, gradually became a shadow and then slowly, gradually went behind the curtain. And Q can pop up at any time, at any point in time.
Right, and
God
do anything.
Do that.
The thing is, that's where I have issues with the idea of the God, because it showed up and it was only doing things back when we were at our most primitive.
No, he was there and doing things when he was first introducing concepts that were so far in demand that there needed to be somebody to guide.
The problem is, our understanding was so low, we didn't have the scientific capabilities we do today. They just...
And?
Basically, what I'm getting at is, how do we know... What reason do we have to think that this God that was around thousands of years ago wasn't an alien? The same case could be made for an alien race that genetically engineered us to being here, that is made for a God. That they were here to set up the initial, and even to make sure that that what they genetically engineered would be able to survive and reproduce on its own. And after they knew that was solid, that they're like, all right, we're done. And then they go away or go behind a curtain type of thing and never be seen again.
Never be seen again. Right. But again, this was not a once and done situation and never to be seen again. It was a gradual withdrawal. And I think that's a little bit different than, once and done, we've done it, and okay, now we're going back to our home planet, never to be seen again. In addition to which, I have to fall back on, as somebody who's Jewish and religious, I have to fall back upon Revelation, because the Jewish revelation is much different than revelation of any other group of people. In fact, there is no other group of people. that has or makes the claims that we do. And as such, why do I believe it? Why do I know it's true? Because my father told me. And why did he know it's true? Because his father told him. And his father told him, and his father told him, and so forth and so on, going back in an unbroken chain, 135 generations, to my ancestor who stood at the foot of Sinai and saw, heard, and felt God. And then we have attested in each generation to the validity of that revelation. But not only that, people have accused Jews of being all sorts of things, but they've never accused us of being stupid.
Right.
So wouldn't you think that this revelation that we claim happened would be one that would have no absurdities in it, because we would stand forward and say, hey, what are you kidding me? That's ridiculous, right? But yet there are absurdities in the Bible, in this revelation, that leads us to scratch our heads and say, hey, we have a continuous situation here, aside from passing it from generation to generation, but we have seen things throughout the generation that have occurred that make us say, hey, this is valid, because this was said that it was going to occur, and it occurred, and therefore we have continuing validation of that revelation. And nobody else can make that claim. Nobody else has even come close to making that kind of statement.
Well, the problem I see with it is basically like a game of telephone.
Okay.
That you have,
and here's where I'm going to short circuit your telephone real quick. But go ahead.
It's just the aspect of stories that are told person to person. They get embellished, changed, so forth, and it's not reliable.
Okay, I think that's a great way of looking at it, except for one minor little detail.
What?
That this transmission, again, if we're going to embellish and so forth and so on, then you would hope that you would be able to embellish it in a way that everybody would buy into it, right?
At least those in your tribe.
At least those in your tribe, right?
Right.
Except remember that after the 40 years of wandering the desert, as the story goes, the people all split up. And they all went their different ways. And this document that we have, the Torah, which we claim was dictated to Moses by God, each one of the tribe members, each one of the tribal groups had a copy of that document. And each one of those documents had to be copied letter for letter from an original.
Right.
So we have no chance of embellishment, except, out in Podunk, Judea, you've got Shmuel, who is not so careful in copying these things, and he, a couple of letters here, a couple of letters there. So, and then somebody is going to take Shmuel's copy, and they're going to copy his copy with a couple of letters here, and a couple of letters there, and so forth and so on. And ultimately, what you're going to have over the generations is you're going to have this line of corrupted documents. Yes?
Which is what we have with the New Testament.
But which we don't have with the Torah.
Actually, why don't we?
Why don't we what?
Why don't we have that with the aspect? Just because what we have how do you know that what you've been handed hasn't been corrupted by mistake after mistake after mistake that was made? And
That's a great question. And let's say we have that line of Shmuel's corrupted document. But then there would be a line somewhere. Let's say Shmuel took his document and he headed off to Australia. And now people in Australia are copying this corrupted document.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, as the world gets smaller and progress and so forth and so on, and all of a sudden, the guy comes from England and he goes to Australia and they're opening up the Torah and they're reading it, and he knows the Torah as well as anybody else, and they read something and he goes, "What? Wait a minute, where did you get that?" Because after all, they've been reading from a document that was corrupted by Shmuel, or by Fred, or by any number of other possible corruptions.
Right.
Except that if you open up a Torah anywhere in the world, it's the same.
The thing is, that doesn't point to the aspect of it, because you can do the same. Christians can say the same thing with King James Bibles and
if you have a King James
whatever
Bible,
translation they have,
and it's a faithful copy of the King James Bible, then you're going to have the same thing, right?
No. That's been proven by Bart Ehrman to be absolutely false, because we don't have any of the original documents. What we have are copies of copies of copies of copies of copies of copies.
Of course. But if they're faithfully copying the copy of the King James Bible,
they're not
all the way through. Well, that's the problem, isn't it?
Every time somebody,
isn't it?
Yes.
So you have variations, correct?
Right, and once you have a mistake,
but you don't have it with Torah, because you can point to a variation between this line of King James Bibles that were copied and this line of King James Bibles that were copied. There's a variance between them. You can't point to that in Torah.
The thing is, it's still, because the aspect with the Torah, it's still a copy of a copy somewhere along the line.
No argument. But remember, number one, in Israel initially, several thousand years ago, the tribes were all set up, and they each had their own copy of the original document, right?
Right.
And then they were scattered to the four corners of the earth, and they carried this document with them. So somewhere along the line, somebody made a mistake, and somewhere along the line it was corrupted. So we would have, because we have, again, go back hundreds of years, how easy was it for somebody in England to correspond with somebody in India? Not that easy.
No.
Okay. So the guy in India has this corrupted document, and now he's producing a whole line of corrupted documents. And we can go back and say, aha, he copied it from this guy, who copied it from this guy, but we can all point to the guy in India who made the first corrupted copy. But with Torah, you can't do that, because there are no corrupted copies. If you go anywhere in the world, if you take the oldest Torah and you open it up and compare it with the newest one just written, they're the same.
That's
you don't have the corruption.
I would find it.
So,
basically, why is it that every other?
Now today it's even easier with computers, where they can take a whole Torah and they can quickly scan it,
right,
and see if it's correct or not. But they didn't have that technology 100 years ago, 300 years ago, 700 years ago, 900 years ago. And you had Jewish communities where? Just in Israel? No, they were all over the world. And believe me, they couldn't send back to Israel, can you please send me a correct copy of the Torah? They copied whatever document was brought with them. So if somebody copied it incorrectly, then down the line, somebody kept copying something that was incorrect, right?
Right, which wouldn't that
but
get...
you don't have that. You don't have that. Unless there was a major conspiracy where everybody got together, and this is for all the conspiracy folks out there.
Yeah.
Everybody got together and said, hey, we found its corrupted line of Torahs. Let's destroy them all and just go with this version.
Yeah, and I don't like conspiracy theories.
Well, when it comes to something like that, I think it's a little far-fetched.
Well, I think conspiracy theories are the last bastion of no evidence.
Okay.
Because if you have evidence,
I will not dispute that.
Because if you have evidence to support your claim, then you don't need a conspiracy theory.
Correct, and I have evidence to support my claim because I can go to a Torah anywhere in the world, no matter how old, no matter what it's been through, and I can open it up to the same spot as the Torah that was just written, and it's the same.
Okay, well, here's a question for you.
Yeah, okay.
Why is it if the Torah and Judaism is right, why are there some Jews that buy into Jesus?
Lack of knowledge.
Is that the only thing that could be?
No, I think there are a number of reasons, but lack of knowledge is the main one. Particularly today, we've raised a generation of Jews who are basically Jewishly ignorant. They think being Jewish is having bagels and lox on Sunday morning. And that, I hate to reveal this truth, but that ain't it.
Right.
And when you were raised in a society where we are inundated with Christianity as we are here, and somebody comes to you with the Jewish Bible and say, hey, look at this. This is talking about who?
Right.
And, they know the Christian story better than they know the Jewish story. And usually when I speak somewhere to prove it, I ask, can you, with a show of hands, please tell me if you can name the mother of Jesus? And just about every hand in the place goes up. And then I say, okay, great. So now, by a show of hands, can you please tell me if you can name the mother of Moses? And everybody sits there real embarrassed.
Mm-hmm.
Because they can't.
Right.
So they know the Christian story better than they know the Jewish story. And when somebody starts showing them, this in the Jewish Bible and that in the Jewish Bible, and, they've got one famous one, we've talked about it before, Isaiah 53, and you package it in a conspiracy theory. Here we go.
Yeah.
Isaiah 53 is never read in the synagogue. Were you aware of that?
Yeah, Christians will say that, and it's
right. So remember, you're this Jew who knows that Sunday morning you eat bagels and lox, and now you come to Isaiah 53 and you read it, and my gosh, it sounds kind of like it might be talking about Jesus, maybe, if you don't know the Hebrew, which most people don't. Then you throw into it the conspiracy that the rabbis have kept it out of the synagogue. They won't allow it to be read. And now you've got a full-blown situation where this Jew who doesn't know anything buys into this conspiracy theory and into Christianity.
And free spirit.
That's one thing. The other thing is that there are people who, for whatever reason, in a lot of cases that I've seen, is the potential spouse is a real Bible believing Christian, and the person knows that if they are not a real Bible believing Christian, they're not going to have this potential spouse. And love
Yeah.
wins out. And I've seen that many, many times. And so there are a number of reasons, but I would say that the main reason, if somebody is being honest, it is a lack of knowledge.
Okay. Well, Free Spirit asks, so what does it mean to be Jewish?
Wow, Free Spirit, that's a great question. Let's see, how many hours do we have now?
The Reader's Digest version, please.
The Reader's I don't even think the Reader's Digest version is short. Let me just say that to be Jewish is essentially to acknowledge and recognize that there is a God, and that God gave certain instructions for the benefit of mankind and how to live your life. And he gave instructions for all of mankind, and he gave instructions for Jews. And even within Jews, he gave instructions for different segments of the Jewish population. And it's essentially to make God known in this world by doing and following the things that he told us to do. How's that for the Reader's Digest version?
Okay, that may be, I'd say for now that'll probably suffice, but...
Okay. I mean, it is a long, involved answer.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to give you the Reader's Digest version.
Right, I understand that, and I know for some, it may seem like what you're doing is pretty much, to use a term, making excuses for certain behaviors like the Amalekites and things that atheists like me look at it and say, this is atrocious, this is horrible. How could anyone go along with this? And I think
but let me go a little further. So let's say you're a member of PETA.
Oh, brother. All right.
And you look at the description of all the animal sacrifices, and you go, holy. No, I won't do the whole cow again. How in the world can you do that? So in a lot of cases, it's your perspective. We certainly have a perspective on it, and our perspective again is borne by an unbroken chain going back to our ancestors who stood there and saw, heard, and felt God. And they have attested in every generation, in spite of persecutions, in spite of all sorts of terrible things, that we're not going to deny the fact that it's true.
Well, because one of the things I hear frequently, and I did a video on the afterlife idea, and I'm curious, because when I did that, I intentionally, because I was looking up, I had somebody throw at me the Pascal's wager thing, and when I looked up the chart type of thing, it listed hell with Judaism, and I knew having that as just the word hell would be inaccurate. So I put a picture of a grave in there, just so I didn't have an inaccuracy that was that obvious. The thing is, what is the Jewish idea of, to use the term, an afterlife, or do you believe in an afterlife?
Yes, we believe in an afterlife. We obviously do not have little guys running around with pitchforks and roasting people instead of marshmallows.
Yeah, because I did a video where I showed the Valley of the Son of Hinnom, and that it's a field. Yeah. Now, are there ever any weddings?
You can go and look at it today. It's in Jerusalem.
Are there ever any weddings in that valley?
Yes, there are.
So someone can say they were married in hell.
Yeah, but hell is an incorrect translation. It doesn't exist. Somebody says
Right.
hell, and we go, huh? It just doesn't compute with us. I'm sorry.
Or are there any
So,
hospitals in that area where a child could be born that they could be? Where were you born? I was
No.
born in hell.
Yeah, no. There are no hospitals there, but there are actually there's a lovely garden there and so forth and so on.
Mm-hmm. But getting back to
it's just a place. It's not hell.
But
It was called Gehenna because that's where at the time idol worshippers did terrible things.
Right.
Right.
And
so going back to what happened. So we believe that everybody, our goal in life, if you will, is to be one with our Creator. And if it means that we pass from this life into another life, that our goal is to become as close to our Creator as we possibly can.
Okay.
And so if you can make an analogy, I use this analogy. I'm not sure it's a great analogy, but I use the analogy.
Mm-hmm.
We're into football season now, right?
Yeah,
so
I think.
Where supposedly are the best seats at the house?
Oh, the 50-yard line. I'm not a football fan, but
I'm not a football fan either, but supposedly the best seats in the house are on the 50-yard line.
Right.
So if you have done everything that you're supposed to be doing in this life, if you have lived an exemplary life and so forth and so on, when you pass into the next life, you get a seat on the 50-yard line. Because the divine presence, that's where you'll be as close to the divine presence as you possibly can. And of course, everybody knows that those 50-yard line seats are only for the Jews.
Oh.
You didn't know that?
Well, it would stand to reason.
What?
It would stand to reason if it's your God and your...
Yeah, except that that's not true.
It's not.
No, I'm sorry, it's not. Because, there are exemplary people who are not Jewish.
Well, I think I'm pretty exemplary, but that's different.
But so those 50-yard line seats, if you will, they're open to everybody. If you live an exemplary life, if you're, let's say, a Mahatma Gandhi, or if you're pick anybody who may have lived an exemplary life.
Well,
why should those seats not be available to them? And it's contrary to our concept that those seats definitely are available to them.
The question,
God doesn't discriminate.
The thing that I would have with the aspect of being a spectator type of thing.
Well, again, don't have a problem with it, because I didn't say that the analogy was the great number one 100% correct analogy. I'm trying to give you something that people might be able to visualize.
Okay, because I'm thinking pretty much why I'd rather, instead of being on the 50-yard line, I'd like to be in the show.
Sure, I understand that, but essentially being on the 50-yard line is being as your goal is to be as close to the divine presence as you possibly can, and that's on the 50-yard line. So if you've led something less than an exemplary life, where are you sitting?
Well, I mean, you could be up in the nosebleed section.
Yeah.
And I guess Jews don't have a concept of hell, so is that where basically us God...
Well, hang on a second. I'll get there. But if you've led slightly less than an exemplary life, maybe you're up a tier. If it's even less than that, maybe you are in the nosebleed section. But what if it's even worse than that? maybe you're still out in the parking lot trying to get into the stadium. And believe me, there's no tailgating going on.
No, there's not.
No. And what about a guy like Hitler? Does he have a place there also?
Well, that's where it gets... Because if we throw Christian bullshit in...
Well, wait a minute. I'm not.
Their ideas would be...
I'm not talking about Judaism. I'm talking about Judaism, not Christianity. We believe that people have a place in the world to come. Even Hitler has a place in the world to come. But you see that long line of cars waiting to get into the parking lot?
Yeah.
His is the last car in line.
Okay, because one of the things
and as such, again, our souls, the aspect that survives in the afterlife, our soul desires to be as close to the divine presence as we can possibly get. We want to be on the 50-yard line. And if you're in the nosebleed section, how do you think your soul feels? Disappointed? Upset?
Maybe.
Yeah. So that to us, if you will, is quote-unquote hell. Because our desire is to be as close to divine presence as we can possibly be. And if we're separated from the divine presence in any way, shape, or form, that's the hell that we go through.
If God is everywhere, as some try to say, then you can't be separated from it. Because it's everywhere.
Again, remember, I didn't say it was a great analogy. I said it was an analogy in which I was trying to illustrate something. I'm a work in progress. Bear with me. It's the one that I've come up with that kind of illustrates the situation. It isn't the best because, again, God is not on the 50-yard line because God is everywhere. I agree.
But
I have to work that into the football scenario. Right. And as I say, I'm a work in progress. I haven't figured that one out yet.
Well, so Free Spirit asks, so our souls have to travel many paths to connect with the Creator to get on the 50-yard line?
Okay, and so let me turn it around and ask a question because I'm not sure that I understand. When you say many paths, what do you mean?
Yeah,
you mean that you have to be a variety of things? Or?
I don't know if that's trying to get at the idea like reincarnation or.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to grasp here, and because I'm not sure that I understand the question, and I apologize.
Right, and that's where I'm not sure, and I wanted to. The many paths had me wondering when I saw it, but I wanted to throw it at you as he has it.
Sure.
Because, like, the aspect of reincarnation, Jews don't believe in reincarnation, right?
Well,
or do you?
I'm gonna take a pass on that one.
Oh,
I'm really, it's above my pay grade.
Ooh.
Yep. There are aspects of Judaism in the mystical side of Judaism called Kabbalah.
Kabbalah, okay.
And the Zohar, which I admittedly am not familiar with. It is above my pay grade. I'm not old enough to know it. There are certain requirements to be able to understand it.
Okay, he said in a nutshell, yes. In a nutshell, in a nutshell, many paths is a reincarnation question.
Got it. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to take a pass on that because I really can't honestly answer it. I just don't know.
Because one of the things, are you familiar with the aspect of what is called sacred geometry?
No, I am not.
Because one of the things, you can check this out, I find it very interesting. And I had mentioned this in a video where I had mentioned to you earlier when when we were talking, and I had said about there were a person that I had answered 10 questions from, and one of them was if you had irrefutable proof that the God of the Bible was real, would you be a Christian? My immediate answer is no. Right. Because if the God of the Bible is real, that would be Judaism.
Yes.
And what I had said as well, and I think it goes hand in hand with that, is if the God of the Bible is real, Christianity is wrong because it's Judaism. And on the flip side, if the God of the Bible wouldn't be real, Christianity is wrong because the God of the Bible isn't real. So no matter how you slice it, Christianity is wrong.
Christianity loses no matter what you do.
Right, because they're riding the coattails of Judaism, but yet they, at no point can they circumvent.
Right, that's exactly where I was in my journey to where I am, because I didn't know what was true and what was not true, and so I looked at it all, looking for truth. And I looked at Christianity, and I saw how many places it disagreed with the Jewish Bible. I just scratched my head and said, "How can you buy this?"
Right, but one of the things that what I was getting at with sacred geometry is there are geometric shapes that have been observed that seem to be natural, to use that term. And one of the shapes that comes up is the Jewish star.
Okay.
One shape that never comes up is the cross.
That's interesting. I had a woman, I can't remember how many years ago.
Well, Mark, before you get into that, I have a question from Free Spirit. Sure. What does lifting the veil mean? Lifting of the veil.
Lifting of the veil. Is that a reference to...
I think that's like Moses? The Holy of Holies.
Well, I was going to ask, is that in reference to Moses when he taught? Or does that have something to do with the tabernacle? Give me a little bit more information, please.
Is that with Moses or the tabernacle, Free Spirit? Because I don't know. Because, well, one of the things, like the tearing of garments that we see demonstrated with it's depicted with Christians that Jews did it with when Jesus was on trial and so forth. What does it mean to rend your garments?
Okay. Rending garments is done basically as an act of mourning. For example, when a close relative passes away, we rend our garments to show that the person has been ripped from us. And it's a sign of mourning.
So when the Pharisees did that regarding Jesus, they would have been mourning him at that point, wouldn't they?
If that occurred, but you know where I am on that.
Right.
So, but I mean, there's so many fabrications put into there. But yeah, that would have been a sign of mourning, correct?
So, in that case, would he have been dead to them at that moment?
When you say
when they rent, would they wouldn't?
You mean like if I said to you, if you do that, you're dead to me.
Right.
Is that what you're talking?
Yes.
Well, no. It means no. It wouldn't be. It's not a symbolic. You're dead to me if the person is still there. The person has to not be there.
Well, the aspect of like shunning somebody.
No.
No. Okay.
No. 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 Now that I said that, let me rethink that. I don't.
Because I know it's.
I don't honestly recall if rending the garments is what's done as well, but there are, for example, when somebody in an Orthodox family marries outside of Judaism, frequently the family will engage in certain, what's the word I'm looking for here, certain traditions that deal with mourning as if the person were actually physically dead.
Okay, so there are aspects where to use and I guess it would be a type of shunning, wouldn't it?
Yeah, yeah, I can see that. I think back, to Fiddler on the Roof, where one of Tevye's daughters married somebody outside the faith, and he wanted nothing to do with her. So yeah.
Interesting. But I'm just like the aspect. Free Spirit hasn't elaborated on what they meant by
Has not.
Has not. So
okay. I apologize to Free Spirit. I'm not sure that I understand what they were getting at. It may be a reference to the there's a story.
Oh, wait a minute.
After, I'm sorry.
The Holy of Holies. He just answered.
The Holy of Holies, lifting the veil. So lifting the veil at the Holy of Holies is once a year when the high priest went into the Holy of Holies. And in order to do so, they had to part the veil to get in.
And was that where they had a rope wrapped around them?
Yeah, that happened. That happened only a period of time when, in fact, the high priest was not the person that he should have been, and what they did was they wrapped, because again, if you entered the Holy of Holies when you were not permitted to be there, then you would die.
Right.
And so they would wrap a rope around him so that when he died, they would be able to pull him out without having to go in to go get him.
Now, here's a question, and it might be a bit of a dumb question or a bit of a sadistic one.
Okay.
If we would have, like in a Jewish culture, somebody that is a psychopath, could we just throw him into the Holy of Holies?
No.
Why?
No. Because we would not violate the Holy of Holies. It's not a quick fix for everything that you want to get rid of.
Oh, come on. It would have been so easy to just toss Hitler into the Holy of Holies.
Absolutely. I agree it would have been quick and easy, but we don't operate that way.
Not to mention, there we could have Jigsaw God. There could be like traps in the Holy of Holies that the God could be, you have a minute to get out of this.
Uh-huh. Except that isn't the way it works.
Well, this God clearly has no sense of humor and no bit of showmanship.
Excuse me. I think he has a great sense of humor.
Well,
if he didn't have a sense of humor, how would you explain the platypus?
Okay.
Yeah. So I think he has a great sense of humor.
Well, I mean, let's touch on humor for a minute, because I had done a video on this years ago. If this God is such, basically having a sense of humor, why is it the only time in the Bible that it mentions this God laughing is what we would call an evil laugh? The laughing at someone's suffering, or laughing at calamity. I'll learn to spit this out. Pretty much the laughing at wicked shit. things that we would call evil laughter. This God never has, and it like with the aspect of where, I forget what her name was, but the old Sarah, when it was mentioned that she was an old woman, but it was one of them, you're going to have a child, and she laughed, and this God was basically, what are you laughing about? And she was making excuses to me. Oh, not at you, not at you.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, doesn't this God understand absurd laughter? Laughing at something because it is just so blatantly absurd to our mind.
Yeah, I think that God does understand that, and I think that the incident that you're talking about, it clearly was absurd to Sarah at the time. And what are you laughing at? I think is more or less an honest question, more than anything else, because here you have been shown so many things, and so what are you laughing at? It's a question. What are you laughing at? And Sarah, in response, doesn't want to offend God because she knows who God is, so she comes up with excuses. But I don't think that God was doing it. What are you laughing at? I'm now going to get you. It was more of, come on, you should know better than to laugh at something like that when I tell you it's going to happen.
Well, I mean, it makes me wonder with this God, where are the chuckles and bits of good cheer? Where are...
Again, I'm going to refer you to the platypus.
To the aspects of, like, the Spock versus Q, where Q had said to Spock, where are the laughs, bro? And Spock had said, our brand of laughter is on the inside. And he's like, how deeply zen of you.
Mm-hmm.
It's like... It just makes me wonder with this God, where is the laughter? Where is the humor? Because if it has no sense of humor, it's not going to like me.
I need to think on that. It's a question I was asked a while ago, and I haven't really thought about in a long time. And the humor is there.
Because I also look at it as someone like George Carlin.
Mm-hmm.
How the hell? If this God has no sense of humor, he's going to have a hell of a time. Someone like George Carlin will be making fun of him.
Yep.
In so many ways.
And don't you think that God can take it?
I don't know.
It's not like, okay, you're laughing at me. Here comes a lightning bolt your way. I don't see any of that. Do you?
Well, that's more of basically in the aspect of its insecurity regarding the worship of someone but him.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that I see as a major character flaw. Okay. Because insecurity, jealousy is a sign of insecurity, and the God openly admits to being jealous.
Yes, openly admits it without any question. I'm not sure as I see it as a sign of insecurity as much as I see it as a sign of come on, guys, you know better than that.
Well, the aspect of jealousy in that regard, this God openly admits it's jealous. In this way, I'm better than that God. I am not jealous.
Okay.
At all.
But I think you're imparting a human type of jealousy to something that is not definable in human terms.
I don't see.
And, when I say that, when we talk about a jealous God, it usually refers to God as a jealous God. Again, as you mentioned, when it comes to worshiping other gods, because I'm a jealous God, and it's really a situation again of come on, guys, what's the matter with you? Look, you just went through the Red Sea. You just went through 10 plagues in Egypt. you're seeing all this fire and hail and smoke and so forth and so on. You hear me speaking from the mountain. You know, what the heck is going on with you? It's that type of jealousy that I've shown you so much, I've done so much, and this is where you're at?
Well, in that regard, the aspect of the God being, as if he was the God legitimately pissed off about the golden calf thing?
Legitimately?
Yeah.
What do you
Well,
mean by legitimately?
the aspect of,
Should he not have been?
I'm not trying to say he was
Wait,
wrong.
whoa, time out. You take your kid to Hershey Park,
Mm-hmm.
and you buy him every aspect of ice cream and popcorn and you know, and so forth and so on. Then you take them from Hershey Park, you take them to the department store, and you buy them any toy that they want. And you take them out for a great dinner and so forth and so on. And the kid then goes, you know, I want to watch TV. And you say, hey, look, you know, we've been the whole day outside, and it's now 11 o'clock at night. It's time for you to go to bed. I hate you. You don't do anything for me. Would you be a little perturbed?
Yes. And hey, I
Okay.
thought you were going to go to the, after all that, they go to someone else and go, Daddy!
No.
But I get where you're
It
coming
would,
from. But,
yeah, I think, you know, after you've done everything else, because remember, the golden calf wasn't somebody else. The golden calf was an attempt to
wouldn't it be replace the God?
no, not at all. It was to say that this is how we see the God who did all these things. And then God says, "What are you, nuts? You didn't see any of that garbage. What is the matter with you?"
Because
And they're really perturbed.
I've equated Jesus to the golden calf. Would
In
it,
what way?
the aspect of basically Christians have made it, he's an idol to them.
Hmm.
And
And well, some Christians may have. I think there are Christians who have not, and
all of them make him out to be a deity.
no, that's not true. I've run into Christians who made him into a prophet, who made him into any number of things, but not a deity.
One of the things I hear frequently in videos and so forth is Jesus is God.
Yes, I'm not saying that the majority of Christians don't. I agree that the majority of Christians do, but I have run into Christians that don't.
And
In
well,
fact, I'm I don't want to say I'm working with. I don't know what the relationship is, to be honest with you. I am talking with. I guess maybe that's the best way to describe it, because I don't fully understand it myself. Of people who have come out of Christian churches who accept the Bible as valid Word of God, and yet in some way, some aspect, still hold on to Jesus. And for the life of me, I can't figure it out. I really
yeah,
can't.
because
And
that indicates to me they don't understand the Jewish Bible.
well, you know, I don't have sufficient information to answer the question, because I'm really perplexed by it. We have seen over the last, I don't know how many years, and it's not a huge number of years. We've seen a lot of Christians who are coming out of churches and who are in fellowships that accept the Jewish Bible and the Jewish Bible alone, and yet there are people in these fellowships who cannot or do not or will not give up Jesus in some aspect. And I don't understand it. I'm trying desperately to understand it.
Well,
And
from
in
a
fact,
Christian,
I'm going to be meeting with some of them. And that's the very question that I want to ask is, you read the Jewish Bible, and you know that all these supposed prophecies about Jesus don't apply to him. How then, and in what way do you look at Jesus?
right? Especially
to me, go ahead.
Especially given the fact that it's written in Deuteronomy, I think it's 18:22, where it says if a prophet predicts
Right,
something
falsely.
and it doesn't
Right.
happen, do not believe them.
Verily I say unto you, there are many here who will not taste of death before they see the Son of Man coming.
Exactly, and that's
I know. I'm well aware of it.
just
and
like
that's why
where Jesus said, anyone that believes on him, the works that he did, they will do. Well, there's no Christian
Right.
that's going out and raising and healing the blind, deaf, or paralyzed.
Right. I scratch my head. I don't understand it. I'm meeting with a couple of people in a couple of weeks, and these are the questions that I'm going to pose to them, and I'm looking for answers, and I'm looking for understanding, because quite honestly, I'm puzzled. I really am puzzled. I have, in all my years of dealing with Christian missionaries, I have yet to run into people like this, and now I'm running into them left and right.
Well, Free Spirit had mentioned, and he said the Antichrist, and I guess that was in relation to the aspect of making a prediction that doesn't come true. But
okay, are you sure? Are you sure that that's not the reference going back to the veil?
What?
Because within Christianity, there is the story of how when Jesus expired on the cross, the veil in the Holy of Holies was ripped from top to bottom.
Okay.
So, I'm not sure that's not tied together.
Okay, that might be
maybe Free Spirit.
Because I think Free Spirit was a Christian before they became an atheist in the place of, and they were a Christian.
Well, you can tell Free Spirit that I'll be happy to try and save him.
Well, he's okay. He's an atheist now, but Free Spirit, I'll be happy to try to save you. Because everything you've said, well, let's touch on this aspect of the Antichrist. Because I've said every time people mention that there is no Christ, so there can't be an Antichrist.
Yep.
And okay, I just wanted to make sure I wasn't, because it's one, as long as the criteria for Messiah have not been fulfilled, you can't have an anti-Messiah.
Correct.
And after, if the criteria for Messiah would be fulfilled by somebody, there couldn't be an anti, could there be?
No, there couldn't be.
Because that would mean that somebody is starting wars, destroying the third temple, and I don't understand how you'd even have an anti.
I don't either. Remember, it's strictly a Christian concept.
Yeah.
There's certainly nothing in Judaism about anybody opposing Messiah, because again, we believe that the time the Messiah comes, when the world has been perfected. And if the world has been perfected, what's the issue?
Right. Now, do you watch the aspect of different television? I don't watch TV too much, but I have Hulu, and there's different TV shows like Lucifer and Damien. I'd be curious, do you watch those, or would you?
No, I have no interest in it.
Because when I started,
I'll tell you what I watch. I watch, for example.
If you say supernatural,
Uh,
I'm going to scream.
no, I watch the series with Leah Remini about Scientology.
Oh.
I watch. There's another program of a number of sisters who are helping people out of the polygamous cult groups in Utah.
So
I'm sorry.
documentary type of programs.
Yeah, essentially. But an aspect of what I have done over the years is I've worked to retrieve people from cult groups, so I have a real interest in that. And, that's what I watch.
Now,
Drives my wife nuts, but that's what I watch.
Mark, this free spirit has mentioned something that I can tell you from just looking at it, we're not going to have time to get into this today.
Okay.
But I'm thinking we might be able to give the the extreme Reader's Digest answer to.
Uh-oh, now you put me on the spot.
They believe that the 7-year tribulation is connected to the Daniel week. And
okay.
that was what we had talked about when I had a very bad audio. And for free spirit,
so I'll give you the abridged Reader's Digest version.
Yeah, we can do that at a later interview that's not live.
Sure, but I'll give you the abridged Reader's Digest version. The answer is it's not. Next question.
And, well, it's also, as you had said to me, that the problem was Daniel couldn't count, and neither can Christians.
Correct.
That if you actually add everything up and have the dates right as far as when things happened, you find out that Jesus wasn't at the right time.
Let's deal with what Free Spirit is saying here. Let's say you add everything up. Remember, when was Daniel? How many thousands of years ago?
Oh.
And now we're getting to the 7th week in Daniel?
Well, that's connected to Jesus.
Very long count.
Well, that would be, Christians try to connect it to Jesus' birth and so forth.
Yes, I know what they try and connect it to. And again, the abridged Reader's Digest version is, no, that's not what it's talking about.
Right. Because the time frame is wrong, and basically it came down to the angels.
The count is wrong, the time frame is wrong. A lot of it, most of it happened already.
Mm-hmm.
It has nothing to do with tribulation. There's so many aspects of it.
Because there is no tribulation with Judaism as far as the end.
No, there is not.
Okay,
that's correct.
Right, because if the world is being purified and gotten to a place of a peace, you wouldn't have these wars and this calamity.
You think?
If there's no more war, you can't have war.
You think?
It would seem.
It would seem to me too. When Isaiah talks about beating swords into plowshares and spears into pruning hooks, and nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. That seems to me to be a very clear-cut situation.
Right. And it's not, because I had said in the video I did before the live show that you had said about the aspect of Christians say Jesus will do that when he comes back. Well, he's not the Messiah until he does it.
Well, wait a minute. My father's going to do that when he comes back, too.
I love that answer.
Why not? Wait a minute. Why not?
Right.
Have you got any proof that my father won't?
Right.
So, when my father comes back, that's what he's going to do. And I'll go you one better. My father's got a better shot at being Messiah than Jesus does.
Okay. Enlighten me.
Because not only does he have to be Jewish, which Jesus supposedly was,
but
he has to be from the tribe of Judah, from the house of David,
right,
through Solomon his son. My father was, Jesus wasn't. Because
okay.
In the book of Matthew, who is it claimed to be the father of Jesus?
They try to say God.
And if God is the father of Jesus, then how in the world does he get into a house and a tribe?
Right.
He doesn't. Because biblically, the only way you get into a house and a tribe is if your father is from that house and tribe. And if his father is God, then you mean to tell me that God came from the tribe of Judah and the house of David? I don't think so, because that would put God after Judah and David.
Right.
Problem, yes?
Huge problem.
So, as I say, my father has a better shot than Jesus does.
And that is something that, because the aspect with that, Jesus was disqualified before he was even born.
Supposedly, yeah, because supposedly God was his father.
Right. I mean, in that, right from the word go. Because, and it's something, one thing I've hammered on with Christians as well as the aspect, because I learned this from you, is the Hebrew word Alma and the Hebrew word Bethulah.
Bethulah.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
That Alma is a young woman, and a young woman giving birth is no miracle.
Correct.
And the other is a sexual virgin.
Correct.
And that the word used in Isaiah 7 is Alma, which, even though that's not talking about Mary in any capacity, but even if it was, it's a young woman giving birth, and that's a big so what.
Well, there are so many other aspects to that. The main one is that the prophecy is repeated again in chapter 8 of Isaiah, right after that. The same situation, and it talks about the person giving birth. It tells you who the person is.
Okay, because I did look that up, and I had said about the wife of Isaiah, but it would be King Ahaz's wife.
No, it was the wife of Isaiah.
It was? Because King Hezekiah his father was King Hezekiah, or King Isaiah.
Right, but remember, the sign is to Ahaz. And so who is it that Ahaz can look upon? He can look upon any of the women who might be pregnant at the time. But the prophecy says that before the child who is born of this reaches an age where they can tell between good and evil, that the situation that Ahaz is facing is going to be resolved. Well, it goes on in chapter 8 to say the same thing, only it says specifically who the young woman is. And the young woman is said to be the prophetess, not the queen. She is the wife of Isaiah.
Okay. Now, would that mean that King Ahaz adopted their son?
Why? What does it have to do with... The only thing that has to do with the son is that the child grows up. That's all.
Didn't it become King Hezekiah?
No.
No?
No.
Oh, okay.
Different kid.
I thought that had to be that the child would also be becoming king and so forth, that was in...
Chapter 9. It's not the same person.
Okay.
Chapter 9 is about Hezekiah, but that's not who it's referring to in chapter 7 and 8.
Okay, I gotcha. But, alrighty, well, we've reached pretty much the 2-hour mark, and that's where I try to draw the line with the live videos because, well, I get to where I need a cigarette. and
I need to go to bed because I've got to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go to work.
Well, everybody, thank you for watching. I will talk to you guys later.